Welcome! In this video we're going to take a quick look at the Tabletop Simulator mod for Dante Inferno, the upcoming board game from Creative Game Studio. It's an epic campaign game for 1 to 4 players, incorporating exploration, branching narrative and cinematic boss fights. I'll put links in the description if you want to learn more. I'll start with a couple of pretty major disclaimers. Firstly, this isn't a how to play, it's just a small collection of tips to help you navigate this particular mod in TTS. At some point in the future, I hope to create a how to play video, but in this video I'll barely even mention rules or gameplay. Secondly, at the time of recording, both the board game and the TTS mod are in active development, which means that they're not only likely to change, they're guaranteed to change. Finally, it probably goes without saying that the TTS mod offers just a small sampler of what the final game will include. To make sense of the components on the table, it's important to understand that each chapter of the game is divided into 3 phases. First the Chronicle Phase, which is essentially narrative, then a very brief Transition Phase, which is mainly for housekeeping, and finally the Confrontation Phase, which involves tactical combat on the battlefield. Although these phases are interconnected, the setup of components on the table depends on which phase you're playing. Fortunately for us, there's a handy button on the right side of the table to help transition between the major phases. When you first open the mod, the table will be set up for the Chronicle Phase. Regardless of which phase you're playing, you'll find the rulebook, entitled Book of Commandments, on the right side of the table. That includes the rules for all phases of gameplay. And on the left is the Book of Chronicles, which includes campaign content, such as narrative, confrontation setup and so on. The resource tray is also used across all phases. That includes the Arcana deck, the Wound deck, the Sin deck and more. If you mouse over a deck while the UI is displayed, you'll be able to see its title. These decks will be automatically shuffled when you first start the mod. One important component, which isn't shown here, is the Quick Start Guide, which walks you through the first confrontation. You'll find that PDF somewhere on the table, and of course it's highly recommended, but just be aware that it only covers the Confrontation Phase. If you want to play the Chronicle Phase, you'll need to learn the rules, either from the rulebook or some other source. The One Stop Co-op shop has a great video demonstrating gameplay, and most of those rules still apply. The Chronicle Phase comes first, and I'll start by pointing out that you definitely don't need to play this phase if you don't want to. You can always skip it and play the Confrontation as a sort of one-shot boss battle. But if you do decide to play the Chronicle Phase, you'll find that it's relatively light on rules. In a nutshell, you'll be exploring the map by placing region cards on the exploration board, reading location descriptions, and following the branching narrative. You'll hopefully collect some of these cards along the way, containing various treasures, discoveries, and paths. There are card slots on the right of the exploration board for the cards you acquire, and like many other game components, these cards will snap into place when they're in the right slot. For example, if I acquire a discovery card, it will snap to the discovery slot, but not the slots above or below. You'll also face the occasional ordeal. This involves revealing 5 Arcana cards beneath the exploration board, and a number of smaller blue and red cards called Diligence and Providence cards. You'll attempt to resolve Arcana cards by combining 1 red and 1 blue card. You can optionally draw more cards by offering one of the Arcana cards, which involves moving it to the slot on the right of the board. That will stay there and eventually have an influence on the Confrontation Phase. Wound cards are similar. They have a slot beside the board and they carry over into the Confrontation Phase. Once you've finished resolving an ordeal, you'll need to return all the red and blue cards to their decks. One handy way to do this is by right-clicking on each deck and choosing Reset. I'll just need to turn on the UI to see the right-click menu, and I'll reset. Just remember that you mustn't do this to the Arcana deck, because you need those offered cards beside the board to stay where they are. Instead, you can return Arcana cards to the deck by selecting them, pressing G to gather them into a pile, F to flip, and then drop them onto the deck, and of course R to shuffle. Once you've finished the Chronicle Phase, it's time to do battle in the Confrontation Phase. so I'll click this button to transition. As you can see, the exploration board has been cleared of components and flipped to its reverse side, the confrontation board. And the board has been automatically set up with the Chapter 1 confrontation, which is in the Book of Chronicles. We have standees for the 4 champions and Minos, as well as some pillars, stairs and so on. At the bottom of the table we have an area for 4 champions, and once again you can mouse over components to see their name. There are 4 types of equipment cards: weapon, relic, trait and consumable, each with their own slot. As you can see, each champion gets 1 item of starting gear. You'll always begin the confrontation with 4 champions, but each can be played either as a full champion with their own deck of maneuver cards, or as a lightweight companion. The companion version is on the back of the champion card. Companions are especially good for solo play, if you don't want to be too overwhelmed by choices. By default, the table is set up with full champions, so let's see how to switch some of those to companions. Let's suppose I want to switch the artist and mercenary on the left to be companions. I'll right click on one of the 4 player areas and change its state from 1 to 2. It's now a companion board, and as you can see, this one board has slots for up to 3 companions. So I'll set up the artist and the mercenary on this board. The layout is a bit different, so I'll need to move some components into place. The champion cards get flipped to their companion side. Just like full champions, each companion gets 3 warm-up tokens, a red cube on their health track, and a yellow inspiration token. Companions use the same equipment cards as champions, and there's a space for those above each companion card. Equipment slots aren't as obvious as on the champion boards, but cards will snap into place based on their type. The artist's original board to the left still contains a few components, but those won't be needed by the companion version, so I'll ignore that board for the rest of the game. In fact, I'll move the mercenaries' maneuver cards out of the game. More tokens can be found over here on the right side of the table. The boss card has 3 difficulty levels: tutorial, normal and hard. If you're a brand new player, the tutorial version is recommended. You can always ramp up the difficulty after a few rounds if you want to. There's a really nice dice roller just below the board. Don't touch the die in the centre, that tells it which type of die you're rolling. Instead, use the plus and minus buttons to dial in the number of dice you want to roll, and then click the number at the bottom. That not only rolls the dice, but it sorts them as well, so that you can more easily interpret the results. You don't even need to clean up after yourself, because the next roll will automatically remove any dice left over from a previous roll. The last thing I'll point out is the fierceness track. This consists of 4 tokens, each with an icon representing one of the 4 champions. During the battle, various effects will change the order of these. According to the rulebook, the fiercest champion is the one on the right. As you can see, there are buttons which let you easily move tokens up and down the track. And that's a very quick introduction to the TTS mod for Dante Inferno. A big thanks to Andreas, both for creating this mod and also for sharing all these tips and tricks with us. Thanks for watching and have fun exploring the game.